Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgie Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the Teflon president has come unstuck. In a landmark ruling, the Constitutional Court sentences ex-South African President Jacob Zuma to 15 months in prison for contempt of court. Also, rebel fighters in Ethiopia's war-hit Tigray seized control of more territory after having taken the regional capital of Mekele on Monday. Meanwhile, the US says that it will act against Ethiopia and Eritrea. The government announced ceasefire does not yield humanitarian results. And as Africa continues to fall behind the global race to vaccinate its population, NGOs say that the problem goes beyond a lack of supply, and countries have to take a more holistic approach to tackling the issue. But first, former South African President Jacob Zuma has been slapped with a 15-month jail term for contempt of court. The man who once was jailed for fighting apartheid has less than a week to hand himself in to spend another stint behind bars for failing to respond to a corruption probe. The move by the Constitutional Court is an historic one.
It's the first time in South Africa's history that a former president has been sentenced to prison. Found guilty of contempt of court, Jacob Zuma was slapped with a jail term on Tuesday after failing to show up at a corruption inquiry earlier this year.
Not only has Mr. Zuma failed to dispute the contempt of court, he has also failed to contest the degree of the contempt. Instead, he has aggravated it. The majority judgment orders an unsuspended sentence of imprisonment for a period of 15 months.
Zuma is accused of enabling the plunder of state coffers during his tenure from 2009 to 2018. Most of the claims being investigated involve three brothers from a wealthy Indian business family, the Guptas. The family won lucrative government contracts and were allegedly allowed to choose cabinet ministers. Zuma and the Guptas deny wrongdoing. Before the 79-year-old was forced from power, he responded to mounting pressure by setting up the corruption inquiry himself. The panel, however, has come up against years of resistance from Zuma. He only testified once in 2019 before staging a walkout days later and accusing the commission chairman of bias. The inquiry is just one of Zuma's legal woes. He's also facing charges relating to bribes he allegedly received during South Africa's 1999 arms procurement deal. The former president now has 5 days to hand himself into police, or authorities will take him into custody.
Well, for more on this, we're joined by Sam Brad-Peace, who's in Cape Town for us. Sam, first of all, tell us a bit more about why this is such a momentous decision by the Constitutional Court.
Well, if you don't mind, Georgia, I'd like to start with the first lines of this judgment, which was passed down by the Constitutional Court today. They quoted Nelson Mandela, who spoke at the court's inauguration back in 1995. The quote reads, "We expect you to stand on guard not only against direct assault on the principles of the Constitution, but against insidious corruption." Now, many see this judgment today really as a step towards justice, after Jacob Zuma has for so many years failed to cooperate with the Zondo Commission. That's the far-reaching inquiry into corruption, which happened under his watch as president. Now, estimates vary as to the cost of corruption to the South African state under Zuma, but at the very lower end of this estimate, we're talking about at least $35 billion. So a huge amount of money, and just simply for the integrity of the country and for the integrity of the rule of law, this is a very important sentence, and that's exactly how the Constitutional Court framed things today.
I think a lot of people will be quite surprised that it's got to this point because, something finally sticking to the man that was once called the Teflon president. We saw, him surviving a number of political challenges. He didn't seem to take the legal challenges particularly seriously. Do you think that he will actually end up serving jail time?
Well, Jacob Zuma now has 5 days to turn himself into the police. Should he fail to do so, it will be up to the Minister of Police to issue an arrest warrant. Now, Jacob Zuma has faced arrest warrants before. Recently, we're talking about post-apartheid South Africa, but never ended up in a jail cell. Now, some groups loyal to the former president, including veterans of MK, that was the armed wing of the ANC during the liberation struggle, have come out and said they will do everything in their power to stop Mr. Zuma from going to jail. And personally, Georgia, I think it does not look particularly likely at this stage that he will actually end up in prison. It would simply be too divisive for the country. But who knows? He's expected, according to the Jacob Zuma Foundation, to address the nation potentially even within the coming days.
So you touched upon the amount of support that Zuma still commands in the country there. What do you think this will mean for the ruling ANC party?
Well, it has to be said that the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, has in many ways reduced the influence of the pro-Zuma wing within the party. And this sentence, once again, in many ways could be seen as a display of strength of the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa. Mr. Zuma has lost a number of high-profile allies recently, including Ace Makashule, the ANC Secretary General. Many in the rank and file of the party, though, we're talking about grassroots supporters, do still support Mr. Zuma. They see him as a liberation hero, someone who fought against apartheid, someone who has already done time, as you mentioned, on Robben Island. So it's difficult to say. I can't really see the electoral prospects of the ANC party changing as a result of this sentence. If anything, it leaves Mr. Ramaphosa in quite a strong position.
Thanks very much for that roundup. Sam Bradby set for us in Cape Town. Now, the US has said that it will not stand by if the ceasefire announced by the Ethiopian government in the northern region of Tigray doesn't lead to improvement there. Washington's currently weighing up whether to call the humanitarian crisis and reported abuses that have resulted from months of conflict in Tigray, crimes against humanity, genocide, or war crimes. Now, federal troops backed by Eritrean soldiers have been battling local fighters since last November. The crisis took an unexpected turn on Monday after Tigrayan fighters retook the capital of Mekele on Monday. Maria Gerth-Nicolescu tells us more.
Tigrayan forces have continued to advance throughout the region. On Tuesday, they are now in control of several cities, especially in the north of the region, cities such as Shire or Adwa, which were previously controlled by Eritrean troops, but Eritrean soldiers reportedly withdrew from those areas towards the northern areas near the border between Tigray and Eritrea. Tigrayan forces are also reportedly advancing south of the capital Mekele, according to the spokesperson of the Tigray People's Liberation Front. So this contradicts the government narrative that was saying that fighting is only very sporadic in the Tigray region, that they had control over the situation. The Ethiopian government on Monday evening called and declared a unilateral ceasefire officially to allow farmers to work in their fields and to facilitate the humanitarian access to the area. Tigrayan forces, however, see the withdrawal of Eritrean troops as a military victory. They say that they will continue fighting until all other forces have left the region. This also includes the special forces of neighboring Amhara region.
Maria Gerth-Nicolescu there for us. Now, the African Union has criticised the EU's decision not to include a version of the AstraZeneca vaccine that's distributed to Africa on a list qualifying for a digital vaccination certificate. The fear is that the exclusion of Covishield could lead to discrimination against African travellers. Now, another aspect of global inequality when it comes to COVID-19 vaccine and the continent is the question of access. Africa has the world's lowest vaccination rate, accounting for around just 1% of all doses administered globally, in part because of a lack of supply. But the reasons for the glacial pace of rollouts in Africa are multidimensional. So for a closer look at this, I'm joined now by Dr. Wandwoson Asefa, the Africa Director from Project Hope. Wandwoson, thanks so much for speaking to me. First of all, why is the rollout of vaccination drives in Africa quite so slow?
Okay, thank you for having me. There are quite a number of reasons why the vaccination rollout in Africa is very slow. The first one is there is a vaccine supply crunch, as we know. More than 40 countries in Africa rely on COVAX initiative to get their vaccine doses, and also they rely on Serum Institute of India. And because of the COVID situation in India, India has diverted the the vaccine supply to Africa to domestic use. And that significantly affected many African countries just from receiving their vaccine quota from the COVAX initiative. That's one reason. And also, as we know, the overall logistics and cold chain system in Africa is relatively underdeveloped. And the already available vaccine doses in many African countries are not simply reaching some of hard-to-reach places and population groups. And also, there is a shortage of trained healthcare workers and vaccinators that can easily administer the already available vaccine doses in many African countries. And there is also a difficulty in many African countries to target most at-risk population groups that are eligible in the first round of vaccination. This really includes older people and also people with comorbidity, because there is not simply a demographic registration system in many African countries to effectively track and locate those eligible population groups. And as we know, like many other countries in Africa, we also see vaccine safety and hesitancy issue. That's also playing a very important role for many African countries and then populations, eligible people to kind of access and get the vaccine.
So a lot of different issues all coming together to affect the really slow pace that we've seen of Africans getting access to vaccines. But who should be driving efforts to change this? Is it down to individual nations? Is the responsibility with the international community? Or is even, grassroots efforts something that really should be harnessed more in trying to speed up the pace of vaccine access?
Yeah, I think it really requires a concerted effort to address this issue. Primarily, host country governments in Africa, like ministries of health, are the primary responsible entities, I would say, to address this issue. But it also requires effort from different multilateral organizations, like regional organizations. African CDC has been really playing a very critical role in terms of controlling the COVID-19 the pandemic in Africa. It's been yes.
I'm sorry to have to interrupt you there, but unfortunately, we are coming to the end of the time available to us. But thank you so much for giving us a bit of an insight into some of the priorities that the continent should be facing in trying to address the slow pace of its vaccination rollout. Well, that's it, though, for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.
Bienvenue à Paris. The French capital has been an object of fascination for centuries, and it's one of the most visited cities in the world.
And what's not to love? By day or by night, it's a beautiful city full of towering monuments, inspiring museums, and romantic cafes.
And yet tourists often say Paris would be so nice if it weren't for the Parisians. So where does the bad reputation come from?
Join us as we turn the spotlight on the City of Light and its peculiar inhabitants, les Parisiens.
French Connections on France 24 and France24.com.